is not legal or psychological advice. Listening does not create a professional relationship with Split Up or any guests. Lonnie and Robert are only licensed in the state of Arizona. For legal or mental health concerns, please consult a licensed professional in your state. Guest identities may be changed for privacy.
Hi, I'm Lonnie Sheldon, and welcome to Split Up. Today we're going to be talking about Jessica Simpson's divorce, custody, and money.
And I'm Robert DiCarlo. I'm an Arizona psychologist, also with Split Up.
All right, I'm doing the picture. I love her. Look at her. And I keep making Robert look at this picture because she's 44, and I think she looks as good or better than she did when she was in her 20s. She looks amazing. And what's that called, Robert? Isn't that like a revenge body or something? Is there something?
I've not heard that term.
I'm looking it up. I think I'm looking it up right now. I think there's something like, apparently she's been working out hard and getting in shape and getting ready to do her music again. Is it revenge body?
I mean, she could also be under public scrutiny 24/7, so maybe there's a lot of pressure there too.
Oh, for sure. I'm no doubt. All right. A revenge body is a body that someone achieves after divorce or breakup to make their ex regret the breakup. So, all right, that's good. Apparently she's been working out a lot, and there she is. She looks amazing.
If that were the only thing the other parent would be jealous or upset about, I would say that's probably not a foundation for a great relationship.
Well, probably not. But, I do think that it annoys. I think women love to do that to men. I think, right? I think they like to go out there and look hot. And then the next time they see their ex is like, damn it. Like, look, they're probably mad too about the other issues, but you still don't want to see your ex looking all good and hot going out, right?
I don't know. Maybe you want to celebrate that and, good for them.
Oh, shut up. No one does that. Unless it's you, and no way. No way. I'm going with no on that one. You want them to look terrible. But maybe that's just me. Robert's a good guy.
I'll agree to disagree.
Okay, Robert's a good guy. I think most women want a little bit of the petty revenge, about at least looking smoking hot, and when they see their ex the next time and being happy. So, all right. But anyway, we're talking about Jessica Simpson, not whether or not Robert and I agree on something, which clearly on this we do not. So Jessica Simpson is getting divorced from her husband, Eric. They've been married like 12 or 15 years. And they have 3 kids, Maxwell, 11, Ace, 10, and Birdie, 4. And so there's a couple of issues that are going to have to be discussed here. One, of course, is the money, right? How much money is at stake? They have a prenuptial agreement, which is great. I'm sure they had great attorneys who created that. Apparently, she's got $1 billion fashion empire and $200 million fortune in other stuff. He, on the other hand, was a football player, and I think he has about 10 million. I'm trying to find where I found it, but I think he has about 10 million and she has about 200 million plus her $1 billion fashion empire. So they also apparently had split like a year ago before they even announced it. And so I'm guessing I think they lived apart for like a year, and the kids are probably going back and forth. There's no news on that. I haven't seen that. But Robert, with kids that are 11, 10, and 4, what are your thoughts on that?
Oh, wow. Yeah. So there's a lot of considerations depending on a child's age and development, but you have to look at other factors too, like their temperament and individual personality. So we're going to see differences in how kids across ages and developments respond to a separation and or divorce. If we were talking about a 4-year-old who, would be in the preschool age range, they're really going to have a limited ability to understand the complexities of divorce like an adult would. So they may not grasp why one parent is in the marital household any longer. Their focus and thinking tends to be a little bit more egocentric. So they're the age that may tend to believe more than other ages or developmental levels that the separation is their fault. They're probably going to need a lot more routine and stability through that process than older kids. You're going to see things potentially, and this isn't a one size fits all, but in general, with this age, you may see increased separation anxiety. So may become really clingy to their parents or caregivers. They may fear a sense of abandonment. Sometimes you see regressive behaviors. They may return to things that they have overcome, like some thumb sucking, bedwetting. You may see more intense tantrums reemerge. Mostly, they're just having difficulties verbalizing their feelings. So they may express their strong feelings through play or behavior changes. But you could see increases in aggression. You could see withdrawal. A lot of this stemming from a lot of the emotional confusion they may be experiencing. So for these kiddos, you really are going to need simple, reassuring explanations. So really concrete, really straightforward, really simple. Maintaining consistent routines would create a lot of security and stability for them. And you may want to allow them to express emotion through play, storytelling, art. Might not be a bad idea to consider maybe a play therapist to help them process some of their feelings in a creative way. So that's
Wait, real quick. So you're saying, is that for the 4-year-old, the play therapist, or is that the 4, 10, and 11-year-old? Would you do play therapy for all of them?
You could potentially. Play therapy, I think, is really helpful when you can't do other types of therapeutic interventions, like more of the cognitive behavioral therapy that requires more abstraction and thought. You're not going to be effective with a 4-year-old asking them to, understand the relationship between thoughts, behaviors, and feelings. So you could still do that with the 10 and 11-year-old, the play therapy, but they may benefit from more abstract strategies.
Okay, so I do have a question here because I there is kind of a pretty big age gap, right? There's 10 and 11, which is like bam bam, but then there's this 6-year age gap between the 4-year-old and the 10-year-old. And I'm just wondering, I can see the parents sitting down and talking to the 10-year-old and 11-year-old together to tell them about the divorce. But how do you tell a 4-year-old? And really kind of, do you do it separate probably?
I wouldn't say there's a one size fits all strategy or approach here, Lonnie. It might not be a bad idea to try to pull the younger child apart to have those more simple, concrete, reassuring explanations. Because with the older kids, the 10 and 11-year-old, you're going to be a little bit more open about what would be a clearer developmental understanding for them because they are more aware of family dynamics. They just may struggle to understand things like the adult conflicts. So they may feel more of a tear between loyalties between their parents. And they may also kind of be functioning from the mindset and cognitive processes around moral reasoning. So they may start assigning blame. And sometimes that's with the intention to try to understand and fix the situation. So you can see two very different cognitive developmental lenses between a 10 and a 4-year-old. I don't think it would be a bad idea to pull those conversations apart.
Yeah, I mean, I would be a little hesitant just for what a child knows it for and can understand. Especially if the other two get emotional. I think the 4-year-old might get emotional maybe just because they're watching the other two get emotional. Like they may not understand it on their own, but the 10-year-old and 11-year-old could have a lot of emotion behind that, right? And then maybe the 4-year-old ends up being brought into that emotion.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, even with the oldest child, an 11-year-old, you're talking about, that anger and resentment that might be the prominent feelings. And that could be externalized. It could be shown through outbursts, emotional outbursts, physical outbursts. They could also internalize it. It could turn into anxiety, bodily symptoms like stomach aches, headaches, maybe sleep difficulties. But similarly, these kiddos could become withdrawn and sort of pull away from their family system and focus more on friends, which would be a support as well. But their detachment from the family could be a warning sign that they're having some more difficult experiences. But the older kids, in this particular a family with 10 and 11-year-olds, you're going to see more of that black and white thinking. So they may fall prey to this notion that one parent's good and the other is bad. And that can set up for some unhealthy dynamics too, if it's not intervened upon in a clear way by the parents.
Now, that's a great point, because I actually want you to help me sort of describe what this could look like. When there is a divorce and when they do tell the kids, there are sometimes when there's affairs and abuse and things like that, that sometimes the kids kind of figure it out because there's fighting going on and there's allegations going on. And so the kids might understand that and see that. But in your opinion, if it's not affecting the kids, is there really any reason for the kids to know why there is a divorce?
I think the why will never be satisfying to a child because, again, it taps into the complexities of adult relationships that they've not had the firsthand experience to really understand and appreciate. And again, even children with the ability for abstract thinking, they're not going to be able to extrapolate their childhood experiences and map that onto what it would feel like to be an adult in a complex relationship where you're making accommodations and there's give and take, hurt, betrayal, all of these things that they will come to unfortunately understand in relationships in their own lives in the future are way too abstract to have any sort of bearing on appropriately weighing the true reason behind a divorce. Because it's not usually just one thing. Even if the parents oversimplify and reduce it to one thing, that's a really hard argument to make when we're looking at complex adult relationships. So if there has been something like a betrayal or an affair, I don't advise parents to disclose that to the child because it just creates a resentment and feeds into the notion, the unhealthy notion that this is a one-sided problem, that one parent's to blame and the other parent is blameless. And that could really impact how that child goes on to interact with and have a relationship with that parent. And unfortunately, what we see in some of these higher conflict cases that we deal with, Lonnie, is that the parent who feels betrayed may fan the flames of that negative thinking, and then we get into some alienating behaviors that can really be disruptive to families.
Yeah, I agree. And I tell my clients never to mention that it's not the child's problem. I often have seen my clients or the other client say he left us or she
Right.
left us. And there's no us in this. Typically, I'm not saying it's not always the case or that's always the case, but when somebody leaves a marriage, they're leaving the marriage. And if they want to have parenting time and visitation, then they didn't leave us. They left you, and the kids are still part of them. And for whatever reason, that just didn't work out with you. But don't tell the kids that this parent left them, unless, of course, there are cases where that happens. But if it's just a regular divorce and you've got custody issues and you're fighting back and forth, don't put the kids in the middle of that. That parent left the marriage and not the parental responsibility, typically.
Yeah. And one of the things that I hear often, whether I'm in the therapeutic role or the evaluator role, is I can't lie to my kids. I can't be dishonest to them. And I really push back on that because we're quote unquote dishonest to our kids in a lot of ways. We shield them from adult information that's above and beyond their developmental level all the time. And we do it for benign things like holidays with, Santa Claus, if you celebrate Christmas, or, the Easter Bunny, to even more serious things. You wouldn't disclose to a child if you were sexually assaulted or abused by a perpetrator because that would be frightening and confusing to a child. So there's lots of things we withhold from children. So I just don't buy that argument that you can't withhold that information from the child. And I would challenge those parents to dig a little bit deeper and understand how they're fulfilling their own emotional need by trying to seek the allegiance and alignment of their child against the other parent to feel better about their situation. Because as you noted, Lonnie, it's not the parent is leaving the child. The parent is leaving. I think the most accurate way I look at it is they're leaving a dynamic. They're leaving a marriage that had a dynamic that no longer works for them. And that's sad and unfortunate and potentially hurtful and disruptive for the kids. But on the other end of that is potentially a healthier dynamic for everybody.
Yeah, and you had mentioned earlier about kids feeling to blame, and I used to read my kids, what's the book called? It's Not Your Fault, Cocoa Bear, or whatever. Have you ever heard of that?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not your fault, Cocoa Bear. I used to read this to my kids every night, and I'm always say I'm not perfect, and I admit to most of my faults. I'm sure not all of them. But there were in my marriage and divorce, there were times where we fought possibly about the kids, maybe an extreme punishment that I disagreed with or something like that. And so if there was possible tension drawn with a child's name around it, and I think that makes kids feel like it's their fault, right? And then you get divorced shortly thereafter, but there was a fight about the kid or about something about the kids. And so I, especially in my son was like the biggest eavesdropper in the world. He could be asleep in his bed in a 4,000 square foot house on the other side of the house. And somehow we could literally be in a bedroom with the door closed and he would hear that. I have no idea how. He still today does that. He doesn't hear like when I want him to hear something, but he always hears when I don't want him to hear something, even as an adult. But I used to read this book to them because I thought it was so important that they didn't think that it was their fault, because there were arguments that surrounded them. And as much as I think we tried to keep that away from them, of course, it didn't, we weren't perfect at it. So I'm going to put the link down below in the podcast notification. And so just keep that in mind. There's another book that I used to read. I don't know. Do you have any books that you recommend when kids are sort of struggling?
I'm not thinking of any books offhand for the children. I do a lot of the education at the parent level and the co-parent level because I feel like they're the best conduit to help their children adjust. So there's lots of great resources for co-parenting. Lonnie, you and I have colleagues who have helped with some of those projects and books. One of the ones I really liked is Dr. Moran's and Dr. Sullivan's Overcoming the Alienation Crisis. Because it really does speak to some of the dynamics that emerge in these types of cases where somebody feels really hurt or betrayed, and just ways that the parents can really focus on the needs of the children and not feed into these types of conflicts.
Right. And there is another book that I had that I'll link to, but this was also that was one of our friends that wrote this book. Is it going up? There we go.
Oh yeah, co-parenting by design. Yeah, any of
Yeah,
those
that's
books
by
that focus
Nicole
on.
Yeah. So that's one of them too. I just happened to be reading that one earlier today. So we will put those links below where you can get them. They're great books. And so if you have any questions, those typically will answer a lot of questions. So, okay, there's a lot of money involved. California likes 50-50. Let's kind of just whip down this with Jessica and Eric. They both have some money. There's possibly going to be child support payments that are going to be paid by Jessica, unless she has like all the parenting time, because she makes, I think, significantly more, unless he's got some kind of projects going. The guess is that she makes more. And so California doesn't have a cap on child support. Now you can in a prenuptial agreement, you can discuss what the spousal maintenance is or isn't going to be, but you can't do that for child support or parenting time. I have heard of somebody putting in there that that one parent will pay for the nanny. So that's kind of an interesting one that I've seen in a prenup that could come in handy in something like this. I don't know if they have it or not. It'd be interesting to see their prenuptial agreement. But California does like 50-50. And so unless there's something odd that's coming up, which there's been nothing negative said, I think, about either one of them. So I don't think that there's going to be a big battle. They seem to be doing all right. Although I think Jessica is spending more time in another state, but maybe she does that when Eric's got the kids. I don't know. But when they do travel and they go back and forth, Robert, what are your thoughts about virtual parenting or virtual calls as it applies to 3 kids with such a big age difference? So you've got I mean, do you have these all together? Are all kids together on like a FaceTime at one time? Are you just texting the 10 and 11-year-old and doing a quick FaceTime with the 4-year-old? What does that look like in your recommendations sometimes?
So, video-based or even telephone-based parenting time can be a really useful tool for maintaining relationships when in-person visits aren't really possible. The effectiveness of those and the willingness of the children to engage in those is going to vary considerably, especially based on age and other factors. So it shouldn't be a replacement for parenting time, but certainly if there aren't any other options, it's a great way to stay connected. But there are definitely some considerations based on the child's ages that should be factored into those calls. You know, younger kids, especially like, toddlers, infants, and, approaching 4-year-olds, they're really going to have a limited attention span. The younger kids may even struggle to recognize a parent on a screen and respond in meaningful ways, but I would anticipate a 4-year-old could probably manage that much better. The problem though is that that attention span is so limited that they may get bored or frustrated much sooner. The older kids may engage a little bit better, but they still may struggle with longer calls. Certainly, if the parent is keeping it fun and interesting and engaging, that may prolong the interaction in a positive way. But if the frustration becomes greater than the reward, the child may lose interest and maybe even go on to resent those phone calls, and then they become unproductive, and there's diminishing returns in them. Again, as the child ages, that's going to become less of an issue. But then on the other end of the spectrum, with say teenagers and maybe even late adolescents, they're not really interested in talking to anybody on the phone or video if it's not a peer. And so they may get frustrated simply because this isn't something that they want to do. And so it's not that they're not connected or enjoying their parent, but it's just a boring activity for them. And, they're also competing against peer interactions and, social media and other things that may be a little bit more stimulating for them.
One of the things I try to do with my clients when there's a long distance parenting plan, and we really have to make sure that there's some good video communication, is we try and set up like a routine that allows the parent to be part of this kid's day, right? So if they do it right after the kid's getting ready for school, the kid can show the dad the outfit, maybe get ready, brush their hair, brush their teeth while they're talking to dad or mom on the phone, just kind of to have this inclusion of a regular daily activity, and then they can talk. And I don't even know why I came up with that at one point, but it seemed to work pretty well to involve kids like that. What are your thoughts on that?
I think those are all great creative solutions. Again, you have to look at the individual child. Sometimes things like their temperament or, personality may factor into that. So what you do with one 10-year-old may be very different and responded to differently in another 10-year-old. Interactive activities, reading books, drawing together, playing games, they even have like online Jeopardy and, things that you could do together to stay engaged could be other creative ways. If you are going to do something, consistent scheduling may be really helpful too. So the child knows to predict and anticipate when those calls would be.
So you brought this up, and now I hadn't even thought about it, but I know it causes so many problems with parents. But now I'm thinking it's not that bad of an idea. When one parent plays in those multiplayer games with the kid, right? So whatever Fortnite or whatever game that they're playing, sometimes even on the phone, they have apps, right, where you can play with someone.
Yeah.
Is that a good thing, a bad thing? I guess it could be a good thing or a bad thing, right?
Right. I mean, there's so many facets to that, right? Because you're promoting screen time, which some research supports that limits could be really beneficial because you don't want your kid glued to a screen, and the high intensity of the images and even the addictive quality of some social media. Again, you're broaching into this area of diminishing returns. Sure, you're connecting with your kid, but you're sort of losing qualities in another domain. I remember during COVID, there was a really cool feature on, streaming services where you can, have like a party mode where you can watch movies together and they're synced up and you could be on, video and enjoying a movie together. I think the issue comes down to moderation, and variety. If you're using these technologies in appropriate, healthy, limited ways, and they enhance your relationship, great. If you cross that threshold and reach that tipping point in which, you're overexposing them to, things that could be not helpful, then you need to revisit that.
Yeah, we might have to talk about that some more, because I've also had parents feel like it was really intrusive for a parent to sort of butt into a game that the kid's playing. But if the kid's already playing the game and it's not affecting really what that other parent would be doing, is it a big deal? But possibly because maybe they wouldn't be playing it for as long, or you know what I mean? But that's that's definitely another podcast. I definitely want to talk to you more about that.
Yeah, I'd be happy to.
So, I mean, I think that's about it as far as the Jessica and Eric thing. Thankfully, there's no real drama in that, other than that it's a celebrity with a lot of money getting divorced, and they have 3 really adorable kids. But I think that's it. So hopefully it won't be any big deal.
Yeah, and you can apply these ideas and concepts to any family. And, some of the dynamics in this family include, the higher net worth and higher socioeconomic status, which may be a factor in their resources and ability to provide for their kids. But there's families on the opposite end of the spectrum that the aspects of these issues will still come up, like video-based calls or telephonic calls, or parents who have to travel for work. So, these are not one size fits all types of situations, but there are similarities.
That's another point, just before we wrap it up. When you said that, that's such a huge point, because there is not a one size fits all. And if you prepare a parenting plan with an experienced lawyer or with an experienced mediator, you're going to get to use a lot of creativity and be able to implement your family style in your parenting plan, as opposed to just letting a judge do it. So keep that in mind, because there's not a one size fits all. There's not a one phone call that works, or a FaceTime, or playing a game, or relocation. They're all different. And if you have the opportunity to mediate that instead of going to court, you're going to end up with a much more fitting parenting plan for you and your family than you would if you did a one size fits all through the court.
That's such a fantastic point, and I would just reinforce that idea. You know your children better than an evaluator, a judge, or an attorney ever would. And if you can cooperate and collaborate with your co-parent to find a parenting plan and a schedule that fits your kids' needs based on what their true interests are, the family's going to be doing so much better. And you could tap in professionals. You can hire somebody that does custody evaluations or that does mediation to help walk you through that in a collaborative way. There's lots of great paradigms for collaborative divorce. And even if you just had an experienced forensically informed therapist or psychologist, or even an attorney, sit down with the two of you and work those aspects through, that's going to be the ideal scenario.
Actually, I'm going to be talking Robert into doing a course on this anyway for Learn Law for All. So we'll put the link down there. I did do a course on parenting plans on Learn Law for All. It's like a 90-minute course. You don't have to watch it all at once, but it does give a lot of insights into problems that can happen with parenting plans, as does this book, which I'm going to put the link in below, by Annette Burns and Nicole Stoutner. I'm not going to pronounce her last name. But that's a great book for that too. But really reach out and try and be creative with your parenting plans, as opposed to just handing it off to a judge and then trying to rework a really basic plan into your life that's probably not very basic, and probably not like the person's life that went to the judge right before you. I mean, you can hire someone like, a forensic psychologist, someone like Robert, but you can't have Robert. But Robert's doing this, but but yeah, I mean, really try and be creative. All right, you can use
And
Robert for a little bit, maybe.
and Lonnie, I'm going to go out on a limb here and just say I would say the vast majority of family court professionals, whether they're on the legal or the mental health end, would be delighted to work with a family who wanted to collaborate and work together to create a fantastic parenting plan. The folks we tend to deal with, it's because the court has said you must do this. You're appointed now to work with a forensic professional. One parent is most likely going to be dissatisfied with the outcome because it can't meet everybody's needs. So again, it's just another reason to reach out to the professionals. They would want to work with somebody or a family that would be willing to do that on a private basis.
Yeah, I agree. All right. So in closing, if you have any questions about these things, really feel free to email us. There's an email address associated with this podcast. You can also download Split Up, which is our app that walks you through family court issues. And our part two, hopefully by the time this airs or shortly thereafter, we will have the coaching part of the app up. So we're hoping to have that up soon. Also, it might not be up right away, but we'll get that up also. And then we'll have the links to the books. And if there's a subject that you want us to touch on, if you're like, gosh, I'd really like to hear, a forensic psychologist input on this issue, feel free to reach out to us and tell us, or comment in the section for the YouTube part. I don't think you can comment on podcasts, but the YouTube video, you can comment down there and let us know. We'll look at those, and that might, cause us to do a different video. Thanks.
Thanks, everyone.